Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how I made this really cool mesh cover up slash jumper, and I really like it and I think it's perfect for summer. So yeah. I started off by making a slip knot and then crocheting a chain that was 24 inches long, and that was just the width of the front panel. So depends how big you want the jumper to be, but I recommend measuring the width of the front panel of your favorite jumper and using that measurement to determine how long your chain would be. So once I'd done that, I then did 2 chains, so 1, 2, and then I skipped 2 stitches, so into the 3rd stitch, and then did a double crochet stitch, and then I chained 2, so 1, 2, and then I skipped 2 stitches, and then I did a double crochet into the 3rd stitch from the other stitch. And I just repeated that the whole way along the chain, so chaining 2 and then skipping 2 stitches and then double crocheting into the 3rd stitch from the last stitch. And yeah, I just repeated that the whole way along the chain. So once I'd done the whole chain, I then did 2 chains, so 1, 2, and then I just double crocheted into the first gap, so there should be a lot of gaps. And then again I chained 2 and then double crocheted into the next gap, so just 2 chains and then double crocheting into each gap, like so. And if you don't know how to double crochet, it's just wrapping the yarn around the hook and then inserting it into the gap and then bringing a loop through, so there's 3 loops on the hook, and then pulling through the first 2 loops and then pulling through the last 2 loops. And yeah, so I basically just did that the whole way along the chain again, so again chaining 2 and then double crocheting into each gap, so I just did that the whole way along the row. And once you've done that row, you're going to do the exact same in the next row, so 2 chains and then double crochet into the gap and then chain 2, double crochet into the next gap, and so on. And I just continue to do this pattern for each row until the length measured 16 inches. So when the panel was 16 inches long, I then created the collar. So I began by measuring horizontally 5 inches. So I placed a stitch marker 5 inches from the outside edge, and I did that on both sides. So again, measuring 5 inches from the edge of the other side and placing a stitch marker. I then began the mesh stitch again, so chaining 2 and then double crocheting into each gap, and then again chaining 2, double crocheting into each gap, so on. But this time the row ended when I got to the stitch marker. So I then did 7 rows of the mesh stitch, and I turned my work whenever I got to the stitch marker, like so, and then obviously turning my work when I got to the edge, and it should have measured around 3.5 inches. And once I done that, I then chained 1, and then I slip stitched into every gap on the top like stitches until I reached the next stitch marker. So not this blue one, but the other one. So as you can see, I slip stitched and then chained 1 and then slip stitched into the next gap, so each kind of top stitch that I saw, and I just continued that until I got to this stitch marker on the other side. So when I got to the other stitch marker, I then started the mesh stitch again, so chaining 2 and then double crocheting into each gap, and then again I just did the same as the other side. So I did 7 rows of the mesh stitch and turning my work at the stitch marker and at the edge. So once the little side section was 3.5 inches, so identical to the other side, I then cut the yarn, and that was my front panel finished, and I repeated that for the back panel. And then I made a slip knot, and then I began chaining to make the sleeves. So I made a chain that was 15 inches long, again measuring from a jumper that I liked, so the width of the sleeves is 15 inches long. And then again, I just continued with the mesh stitch for the sleeves. So again, chaining 2 and then skipping 2 stitches, double crocheting into the 3rd stitch from the last stitch for each stitch along the row. So again, chaining 2, skipping 2 stitches, and then double crocheting into the 3rd stitch, and I just continued that the whole way along the chain to create row 1. So again, for row 2 you chained 2 and then double crocheted into each gap, and then chain 2 and then double crocheting into the next gap, and then I just continued that the whole way along the row and for every row actually. And yeah, so I did this stitch for every row and I just repeated it until it measured the length of 24 inches. So again, I measured it from a jumper I really like the size of, and I measured the sleeves to be 24 inches long, so that is why I made it 24 inches long, and it was just a 24-inch long rectangle basically. And once it measured 24 inches, that was it finished. And I obviously made another sleeve as well. So yeah, I just cut the yarn and tied a knot. I then threaded my yarn through needle, and then I laid out the front and the back panel, and then I just sewed those two corners together, if you know what I mean, like those two pieces that stuck out like before. So just those two top pieces. So when I laid it out, it looked like this, and then I just got the sleeves and I made sure the shoulder part was directly in the middle of the sleeve panel, and then I just started sewing it to the side, each side of the panel, like so, as you can see. And that stitch that is sewing the two panels together is in the middle of the sleeve. Then I just turned it so it was facing this way, and then I just began by sewing the sides together, like so. So I started at the bottom, and then yeah, I just started sewing the two sides together. And I continued to just sew it all the way up, so that I was sewing the sleeve into a sleeve and not just a rectangle, like so. Then I turned my work and I did the exact same on the other side, so just sewing the sides together and starting at the bottom and then working my way up and then sewing the sleeve together, like so. I then turned it so it wasn't outside in, and then I just weaved in the ends, and that was finished. And thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you decide to make one yourself.